Welcome to your Lansing Connection. I'm State Senator Nancy Cassis, welcoming you to another session of what is going on in Lansing and trying to bring to you people who are really making things happen throughout our state and, of course, impacting our local communities. Today, I am very fortunate to introduce to you a friend, someone who has been very much involved in her hometown, like I am, of Novi, and she currently is the Executive Vice President and Chief Business Officer of ITC. That's International Transmission Company, headquartered right in our hometown of Novi. And she's going to talk to us about the phenomenal success story of this very important transmission company, being sure that we are having our energy needs met both as consumers, residential consumers, and businesses. Linda, welcome to the Lansing Connection. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Senator Cassis. A pleasure to be with you today.
Please call me Nancy.
Absolutely, Nancy.
Linda, there are not as many wonderful stories to be told as that of ITC, and you have been involved since day one. You and Joe Welch had a vision when you were back at Detroit Edison. Let's start there a little bit. Please share with us how this story came about.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, like you say, we ITC, we own, operate, and manage the high voltage electric transmission grid. We got our start right here in Southeast Michigan, as you mentioned. We were once part of the DTE Energy Company. They owned those assets at that time. And way back when, probably 6 or 7 years ago, there were a few of us who were sort of given the assignment to create a business plan for those transmission assets. And looking at sort of where national policy was, looking at the state of the assets, what was the, where was the future of that business. There was a business plan that was developed by myself, Joe Welch, and several others of us who are today at ITC. And that business plan was to essentially reinvest back in the infrastructure, because this is an infrastructure that has not seen investment for the better part of the last 30 to 40 years. And over that same time period, the demand in energy has doubled. And in essence, the investment has been cut in half. So we saw an incredible opportunity to reinvest back in this infrastructure. The electric transmission grid, if you will, is sort of the facilitator of the market, is what gets those electrons from the generator to the customer. Right. Whether it's us in our house, whether it's an industrial customer, a business, that transmission grid is that critical link, much like the state highway is. Mm-hmm. And so we created a business plan, and that business plan was then taken to the executive management and ultimately the board of directors at DTE Energy, and they saw a great opportunity to spin off or sell their transmission assets and redirect, if you will, the proceeds that they got from that sale back into their core business, what was going to be more fundamental to their strategy. And as part of that process, which took I would say the better part of 2 years, DTE undertook a sort of a lengthy process that looked at who were the potential bidders or the people who were interested in buying that business. And so myself, along with many others, were very involved from day one, not only creating the vision and how we would get there, but there was also a tremendous amount of sort of what I call sort of the back office work that had to be done to get us to that point. And that included these transmission assets, were fundamentally intertwined with the local distribution business, the local distribution of electricity. And so there were, months and months of painstaking effort to separate the transmission assets from the distribution assets, because not only had you identified the assets and all of the equipment associated with that, but that also translates into, well, what are the books and records? What are the accounting for those? Because that's what you're essentially selling to whoever the interested buyer is. So that was sort of our, that was our sort of our start, was really a vision We saw a vision, we saw an opportunity, and that vision and opportunity, when it came down to who really was the sort of who was going to buy these assets, they ultimately wanted to take the management team and many of the employees who had been part of creating this business, creating this vision, and who was going to be able to sort of propel that vision into the future. So so that brought us up into the point in which we actually DTE sold the assets, which was in late February 2003.
2003, and during the late 1990s, I was a member of Energy and Technology Committee in the House, and then continued over in the Senate. And during that time, deregulation of the electric industry was in high gear. At least it was supposed to be in high gear.
Sure.
And I think part of the transmission lines spinning off from the distribution and the generation aspects of electrical output was really going forward.
Sure.
And you were part of that. Let me ask you, Linda, it must have been very heady at that time when you were involved in this.
Sure.
The excitement, it must have been invigorating. But also, there were challenges and there were probably risks in you and Joe Welsh and others, part of the team, taking on this transmission grid, if you will, buying it, and then, as you said, planning for the future, a vision for first the Lower Peninsula and then branching out. Tell me what you faced as a woman in this field, on the cutting edge. As you said, this is the first U.S. Independently owned transmission company in America.
Sure.
So what were some of those challenges, and then tell us a little bit about your background that put you in the right place at the right time.
Well, that truly is being sort of in the right place at the right time, but you know, sort of maybe before we get there and sort of presenting some of those challenges, it absolutely was a challenge. And the first and foremost challenge was, you know, we were blessed in the fact that we had a business, we had assets, and we had a revenue stream. And many startup companies, you know, they're starting from ground zero where they don't have any sales, they don't have any revenues. We had that luxury, but the luxury that we didn't have was that we had no office, we had no back office functions. We had no payroll system to pay our employees, yet we had to entice employees to leave Detroit Edison. They had very good jobs. Detroit Edison was a good employer. They had to leave a good employer to come over to a company that had essentially nothing. And we had a tough task of convincing employees to come. You know, we couldn't even go down to the local Office Max or Staples and buy supplies because our business did not have lines of credit. So all of us, that were there at the start, we had to buy company supplies on our own credit cards.
Absolutely, and there was no model for this.
There was
there was
cutting
no model.
Edge. Yeah,
we also, your own.
We also faced the risk. I mean, we were fortunate in that we could. We were sort of a one-off. We got to sort of design, if you will, our business structure. We operate in a regulated environment. But the realities and the risks that we faced is that we all of a sudden were viewed as a threat to many other utilities in the industry. Our focus, our vision, was to bring reinvestment back into the transmission grid. This is an area that hasn't seen investment for the better part of 30, 40 years. So here we are, a very, very small company in sort of the utility industry. We're the only one of our kind. We're very much a target, if you will, for others to ensure that we don't become successful. And I think it was sort of not only had we created this vision and created this model, we had to be successful. We needed to be successful. And every challenge, I think, just made us work that much harder because we had to be successful. And part of the business model that sort of we all bought into and sort of agreed to join. Our early beginnings, we were purchased by a New York investment firm,